Hello, and welcome to Connected Voices with Ventev. My name is Jared VanAllen. I'm your host today. And joining me today, we have Erik Goodmanson, who is the Director of Operations and Assistant Winemaker for Bouchaine Vineyards, as well as Rob Fischer, not Bobby Fischer, the chess pro. Okay, let's make that clear. I think he's a little older than you.
It's a good distinction.
Yeah, exactly. There's some issues with that one.
And your job, Rob, is essentially to kind of make sure everyone understands Bouchaine and kind of what you're all about. And
Yeah, I work here in the tasting room. I serve guests. I have my WSET Level 2 certification in wine. So I, educate people on whatever they want to know. And obviously, I get to serve them the delicious wine that Erik helps to make.
That is wonderful. And Erik, what does a Director of Operations and Assistant Winemaker do for Bouchaine?
It's someone who wears many hats here. And so it's everything from berry to bottle and beyond. It's landscaping. It's also helping with sales. I was just on a couple sales trips. It's helping keep the owners happy and informed. It's doing events all over the country. So it's anything where Bouchaine is involved. I usually have my fingers dipped into that little pot. So.
When you got your degree in winemaking, did you think you were going to be that busy?
I did not think I would be this involved in the industry, but it's interesting that you bring that up, because as I've sort of transitioned into all these different roles within one company, it lets you get involved, and Bouchaine is very welcoming for its team members to not be pigeonholed into one thing. And so it's nice because I've gotten to know not just winemaking, but the wine industry and the wine business as a whole. And I personally find it really fascinating, because I've always told people, if you want to find your way into the wine industry, there's always a way. And whether you're an accountant or a artist or I don't know, whatever sort of avenue there is, finance, that kind of stuff, technology.
So even an old IT guy like me, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
You can find your way or a place within the wine industry or the wine business.
That's very true. And to echo that sentiment, I very much feel certain days, what hat am I wearing today? That's we're a small but mighty team here at Bouchaine. That's how we like to think of it.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, on a day like today, I sat at the blending table for a couple hours after answering a bunch of emails. I'm doing this fun interview, and then after that I have to go to the local fermentation shop to pick up some malolactic bacteria in empty glass bottles to use for samples. And so it runs the gamut of what you do here. Like, no job is too big or too small for each team member here.
Samples kind of the reason this beautiful center here that you have exists,
yeah,
right?
For sure. Yeah.
So I have to say, before we get into the technology, driving in here was a very emotional experience for me. I remember coming here back in the day, and I'm not going to give the real decades, but I remember coming through here back 90s. In the day. We'll say 90s. Could be close.
Right?
And it kind of reminds me also of, in my home state of Utah, the kind of driving through some of those older farms and everything. But coming in here, this bucolic setting is just I was actually late coming in here to see you by 7 minutes, because I didn't want to drive too fast through the vineyards.
Well, Bouchaine is a special property in that regard. For everyone watching us right now, this is not a virtual background behind us. This is truly our patio terrace area where we conduct wine tastings. We actually have some folks sitting in the background doing wine tastings right now. We're the southernmost winery in the entire Napa Valley. If you were to go down our road right here, in less than a mile, you would actually be in the edges of the San Pablo Bay. And all this wind that you see affecting my hair right now and blowing the trees behind us.
Don't hear on the audio.
Yeah, that is coming right off the bay itself. And it keeps our vineyard much cooler than the rest of Napa Valley. I mean, I know we're going to get into this with the technology and the sensors, but I'd say an average summer day at Bouchaine is 75 to 80. That's pretty standard for us. Yeah. Whereas much of the Napa Valley is in the mid to upper 90s throughout the summertime.
Yeah, that's a good 20-degree shift.
Yeah,
in the valley.
And we're only talking about a 15-mile difference to get that 20-degree shift, even less than that in some areas.
Right.
But what I love about this place, too, is it's well off the beaten path. As you were just saying, you're not on the main highway pulling into a parking lot. There is this scenic, winding drive through the vineyards. you can't find this place by accident. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And I think it gives us a sense of, as you were saying, the old Napa Valley, casual, relaxed, slower paced, really nice in that way.
Yeah,
A
and
destination.
I think it does a good job to play on that emotion. Bouchaine does in particular. I think we do a good job of that. Because of that sort of step back in time a little bit versus other areas of the valley, and not to speak ill of our neighbors to the north, but we can sort of play on that emotional feel of what maybe Napa used to feel like a little bit more. I mean, it's still a very modern building that we have in front of us here, and we employ technology and everything like that, but the sort of visuals of Bouchaine lend itself to a different time. And I think Carneros as a whole does that really well. And again, not to speak ill, but there's other areas of Napa Valley where everywhere you look, you see a winery or a house or something like that. Whereas in Carneros, you can take a large, expansive look at the place and just kind of get a better feel for what we have here. Yeah. And so it's encouraging for us to hear about people's sort of emotional take on coming to Bouchaine or being in Carneros, because we need to sort of, it sounds bad, but maybe take advantage of that, or use it to our advantage, I should say. It might be more appropriate, because we want people to really get a feel for the wine country so that they can get a feel of what is in their glass. Because when you take that home to your family, your friends, or just each other, when you're back in Ohio or New York or wherever in the country, when you open that bottle, we want you to remember Carneros. We want you to remember Bouchaine specifically as you're having those wines.
So what I'm hearing is he intentionally emotionally manipulated me on my trip out here.
Very much so.
As he does.
Which kind of brings us to the technology piece, right? So where I became involved with Bouchaine initially, you were here, Rob. I don't think you were here yet.
I was, but we hadn't met.
Oh,
at the
that's
time.
right.
Yes,
Yeah, you had a different position at that
right,
point.
Exactly.
Okay. So at that point, we were approached by Cisco Systems, who was providing some of the product, including kind of the router, the LTE router they use in the field, and then the partner you were using for deployment at the time.
Yeah.
And they were saying, hey, we've got this location where we need to install some service out here for an agricultural deployment in a vineyard. It's a very well-respected, family-owned vineyard. We kind of jumped at the chance. And the interesting thing about it was the first exposure I had to that deployment was your Taste of Technology.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So tell me, so that emotional tie, that being able to see the vineyard, tell me a little bit about how that's impacted the business.
Well, so the Taste of Technology tour and the other tours and tasting experiences we do here at Bouchaine is, we want it to be immersive. We want people, as Erik was saying, you want them to know they're in Carneros. And we really do think of Carneros as certainly a part of the Napa Valley, but its own entity in many ways. And it's nice to allow them to walk the vineyard, to see the sensors, to talk about the bay. You can actually see the bay from up here. We can take them into the vineyard to where you have the Ventev equipment set up on the top of our hill, right in the middle of our vineyard. And you're right at the edge of the water there. I mean, it really is shocking to a lot of people. Even folks who live in the Bay Area, they think Napa's a million miles away because of traffic. But to show them that we're truly right here at the edge of the bay in Carneros, I think it evokes emotion. It really does. And it gives you a sense of, as Erik says, when you go back home, you say, wow, I was there. I think that really resonates with people.
Yeah. So it impacts the customers. It impacts the ability to bring some of that emotion in a remote scenario.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit more then about the technology impact directly on the vineyard itself.
Sure. And I'll take a step back too, and kind of part of the reason of why it exists in the first place is the glorious pandemic that we all experienced. And some of the wheels were in motion pre-pandemic, but the pandemic jump-started that when we had to really pivot towards virtual tastings. And we opened this beautiful new building end of 2019, then promptly shut it for a year. And it essentially became like a TV studio. There was multiple virtual tastings happening all at once. We invested heavily in the technology side there, cameras, sound, lighting, that kind of thing. But it was an opportunity for us to try to reach into people's homes with technology and still maintain a sort of very hands-on feel as much as possible with Bouchaine wines. Part of that then became utilizing technology in the vineyards because of that partnership that blossomed with Cisco. And so Cisco puts some sensors in the vineyard, allowing us to look at temperature, some moisture, wind data at different areas within the vine, so closer to the ground or up in the canopy. And then that expanded to having more sensors like soil moisture probes as well. And so once we had these tools at our disposal, we're then utilizing technology to help with grape growing itself, and then also in concert with more boots on the ground approach to farming that we've taken since day one when both my boss and I got here in 2015. So it's utilizing technology, but also and doing that in partnership with our vineyard management company, because Bouchaine doesn't have its own vineyard management crew like Bouchaine employees that do all the work. We utilize a vineyard management company, Walsh Vineyard Management, who's great partner that we've had for a long time. And so Chris and I, along with Walsh, are looking at this technology to help make decisions in real time. So
okay,
and I'll throw a funny little anecdote on there too about. So I came on board with Bouchaine 5 years ago.
Okay.
And, I came and I learned Chris's background was very much that of a scientist.
Chris.
Apologies. Chris Kajani, she's our head winemaker and the president of Bouchaine as well.
And one of the nicest ladies I've ever met.
Yes. Nice, smart, and an incredible winemaker. So Chris truly has a background as a scientist. She was a research scientist for a biotech company. She has 2 separate master's degrees in winemaking, one in viticulture, the science of growing the grapes, and then enology, the chemistry of actually making wine. So I had asked her, I said, Chris, I've been in the industry for some years now. I've dealt with other winemakers, and I know there's all these different factors you're balancing in the vineyard, acidity levels versus sugar content, just to name a couple. And I said, for you, is there one factor that is the most important above all else? If you truly could only focus your attention on one of these things, what would you be measuring? She looks at me and she says, flavors. And I said, well, no. I mean, I'm talking about this science. She goes, no, you don't understand. She goes, all the chemistry in the world can tell me one thing. If my tongue is telling me something else, I'm going to go with my tongue. And to that effect, because you made me think of it saying your boots on the ground approach, I know Chris and Erik walk the vineyard, the 90 acres of vines, tasting grapes from different areas, different times throughout the summer and parts of the day.
Oh, for sure. I mean, if anybody in our winemaking team, moves on, we hope that the biggest lesson, and if I ever go anywhere else, one of the biggest lessons I'll take in terms of winemaking is you pick for flavor.
Yeah.
Because if the flavor's not there, the wine's not going to be there. And you've just done yourself a huge disservice growing those grapes for the past growing season. And so the chemistry might tell you one thing, or the data might tell you one thing. But if the flavors aren't there, you're not going to pick it. So
what you're saying is that data is great, technology is great, the information helps me, for example, know when to appropriately water, so I'm not under or over watering, and but I still have to walk out. I still have to look at the vine, make sure it's not wilting, so that all the data does what for you then, as a human walking the vineyard?
It's helping us have confidence in our decisions. Because, let's talk about irrigation, for instance. We've got these 36-inch soil moisture probes in multiple locations throughout the vineyard. And what happens is we'll get a call or an email or text from our vineyard management company, or we'll be out there and notice these things. And they'll say, I think we should water this. We've got a heat event coming up. Or maybe they just say, it looks like it's thirsty. And so we'll literally walk out to that block and take a look at those vines. If the leaves are cupping, like they're kind of closing up, it looks thirsty overall, it's sagging or drooping. We may have in the past said, okay, let's go ahead and do that. But now we can at least go look at that soil moisture probe data and say, well, actually the soil moisture profile itself has water in it. There is available water for that vine to be taking it up. And so now we've sort of confused the situation a little bit, but we can make a more educated guess at times, but an educated decision as to what we should do. Should we really water it, or should we hold off on that water another week, or just not do it? And so it's comforting for me to know that you can take data, physical characteristics of a vine, all the anecdotal data that we have, or musings at times, and all that gets kind of thrown into the mix of decision making. And the reason I say it's comforting is because I know that some robot's not going to take my job. I'm not worried about robots taking my job.
Right.
But it's comforting to know that it's not one thing that's going to drive your decision making. It's multiple things.
Right.
And so we've been here now, Chris and I, for 9 vintages, 9 harvests. And so each year we learn more about what the entirety of the vineyard can do and individual blocks can do. And we can take that information and add it to the pot. And so having that data, having the technology in there, it can at times sort of confuse us or confound us a little bit, but it's a good thing.
Right.
Because it makes us really think about what triggers we want to pull on our actions in the vineyard. Because
intelligent actions.
Yeah, and it's very cliche, but great wine is made in the vineyard. There is no doubt about it. And because you can take bad grapes and you're not going to make good wine, but you can take good grapes and you can make bad wine out of it if you're not doing the right thing in the vineyard or in the winery itself. And so
the analogy I always use is you could be the greatest chef in the world, but if you're given horrible ingredients, there's only so much you can do with them.
That's right. Hey, good vinegar is still good vinegar.
right? Vinegar is good vinegar.
So I will say then there's a lot of information flowing back, powered by a little solar system and a Cisco industrial router that's making a lot of big decisions for the organization. I might add, I've seen the videos. There's a camera attached up at the top of that hill, and you've shown me that, shows a very beautiful view. So I will say, if you're out in the Napa Valley, come see Bouchaine Vineyards. Ask them if you can walk up to the top of the hill and see the Ventev implementation and look over the hill. I have to say, Chris is not joining us today. I'd like to extend my thanks to Chris because she has been, and the Bouchaine owners, the family, and Chris have been very gracious with us. We have done your Taste of Technology presentations multiple times with ourselves, bringing in other manufacturers like Cisco that we deal with. It's always been a pleasure. The team has always been nothing but kind and loving, and I can say I thoroughly enjoyed the time I spend with your organization.
Thank you.
Is there anything more you gentlemen want to add here?
Well, just in terms of what the sensors are doing for us, and from my customer-facing side of things, when I'm pouring wine for the guests, it really helps in terms of the trends of the wine industry. I'll give you one good example: Chardonnay. Chardonnay is, I find, to be a very polarizing wine. People sort of love it or they hate it, but there are different styles of Chardonnay, and many American wine consumers, at least when they're starting their wine journey, they don't know that. They just think of what we have had for some decades in California, the more rich and buttery, heavier oak profiled Chardonnays. But from just a general consumer point of view, that style over the last, I'd say, 10 years has kind of taken a little dip in the market. You're getting, changeover in generations of who's drinking wine and, enjoying it. And that style, while there's certainly still a market for it, is getting a little less. And you're seeing a lot more of the French Burgundian style of Chardonnay gaining popularity in America. And what that generally means is less of the butter malolactic characteristic, lighter oak profile with the wine, stronger acidity. And the sensors are definitely something that allows Chris and Erik to tailor the winemaking and the grape growing to fit market trends. You know, if all of a sudden bigger Pinots become in style, or I said, more crisp Chardonnays. I mean, that all starts in the vineyard with the acid content of the grapes, when to harvest. And, you know, harvesting is a very specific thing about exactly when those grapes are going to come off the vine. I mean, not only from day to day, but even the time in the middle of the night when they're picked and things like that. And so, I mean, I know they're still walking, they're still tasting, but to have real-time data be able to help gauge that info for you certainly helps direct the winemaking to follow the market trends.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
That's interesting.
And I would add too, it's nice to be, I mean, I think there's probably other wineries and vineyards maybe doing more, but at least we're a part of the conversation when it comes to technology and grape growing and winemaking. And so it's nice to have partners like you that put us in the conversation, but put us sort of force our hand in using some technology in the vineyard, because as research continues and as technology gets more and more integrated into agricultural as a whole, like, it's nice to be part of that, because if we choose not to be a part of it, I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice, because even though it sort of confuses the decision making at time, it's a good thing that that's happening, and it's a good thing that we're at least attempting to be a part of it, because there will be time when more technology gets put in place out there, and so we'd like to be at least open to the ideas that they can bring to us. And so we're never gonna step away from having that boots on the ground approach, but the more tools that we can put in the toolbox, the better for us. And so having partners like yourself, you know, only empowers us, and really does, and though it may sound easy to say, like, it makes for better wines to be made. And that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to take that vineyard and put it into a bottle.
Right.
And the more information and, you know, everything that we can do in those decisions makes for better wine. At the end of the day, that's really what we want to do. So
that's interesting. So it brings up one of my favorite sayings with my boys, right? And that is that change is just inevitably keeping up. If you're not keeping up and if you're not changing, you're just not keeping up.
Yeah.
And it's that simple. So it's really good to see that kind of espousing the whole idea of where does this go next in blending the technology and the human. We have a beautiful bottle of Pinot Noir sitting in front of us here. It's been tempting me this whole time, and it's been lightly aerated. Number one, thank you again for your time and for your business relationship. We appreciate it.
We sincerely appreciate the partnership with you as well.
Absolutely.
Thank you. What are those little tractors called? The little skinny ones that go up the middle of the aisle of the rows?
Tractors.
Okay, because they're cute little tractors. And then, can we have a glass of wine?
We certainly can.
Let's do it.
This is our Calera Pinot. Here,
It's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah, so this is from a replant that we did in 2017. So the second vintage that we've had of this Calera clone Pinot Noir.
That's beautiful.
Cheers, gentlemen.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thank you again.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.